Okay, hi, welcome to Yoga How To. Today we're going to talk about mentorship in the context of yoga community. So we've got teachership mentorship, we've got peer-driven mentorship at the teacher level, we've got studentship mentorship, and then we've got peer-driven mentorship at the student level. Why it matters, how to seek it, and how it will help your yoga practice and continue to give you spiritual energy. Check it out. So a little backstory on why this one matters to me. Mentorship has been huge in my life. My story of yoga begins with gaining mentorship from my sister, who was the first person to teach me yoga, and then of course my wife, who was the one who taught me how to teach yoga. So mentorship has been a huge thing in my life in terms of relationship, in terms of accountability, in terms of import, and even beyond the yoga world. There's been recovery circles that I've sat in, found the huge power of just showing up and sharing. Of course, like, the way that the magic works in those secret rooms, it's always about like somebody sharing who's worse off than you, and you think to yourself, oh, I'm just glad I'm not that person. And then there's people who are better off than you, so to speak, whatever that means, and then you can aspire to be like them. So those kinds of things really help and matter. The other spaces in my life, last year or so, I've been doing a men's circle, a men's group, and I found a group of guys online. We're all over the country who sit in circle once a week, and we have brotherhood, and we share, and we work on our learning and growing and healing. And as a 46-year-old man doing spiritual work and needing also spiritual energy in life, these are the kind of relationships that I'm seeking out in my life, are relationships with people who are also willing to embrace improvement, albeit imperfect progress. So, number one, let's start with Sangha. As a student, this was a really important thing for me. I remember early days before I became a teacher, I was really taken aback by the people in my yoga community because they were so shiny and so happy, and you could tell the practice was really working. There was something in the water, so to speak. Not that we were drinking the Kool-Aid, because it wasn't that kind of yoga Sangha, but it was something that was inspiring, and just being around people who are trying to show up for themselves and willing to do a hard thing. At that level, for me specifically, I can say there wasn't a lot of the intrinsic art of self-accountability happening in the yoga practice at that level. At that place, it was a lot about appreciation and inspiration. It wasn't till I became a teacher that I ended up getting into a deeper domain of the absolute importance and requirement for such fierce self-accountability to be able to take the seat of a teacher, to be able to hold the space for your students. To be a mentor for students is to put them first in many cases. And for years early in my growth and learning, there was a lot of times where it was like a student would come to me with like a problem, a spiritual problem, or whatever it might be, and it was very, you know how it is, it's very easy to see what the solution is for somebody else's problem. Obviously, no matter how much yoga you do, it's still always much harder to see what you need to work on for yourself. But what I didn't realize in those early days was that it doesn't do anybody service to tell people what they need to do. It took me many, many years to learn, not only number one, that until they come to that understanding of their own, it is useless. It actually diffuses the momentum that they have behind the investigation of what they're trying to figure out. Even though you know it and you want to be like the I told you so, or like the smart teacher, right? Like the I'm so helpful, I'm so useful. That, at least that was my story, right? So it took a great amount of restraint and maturity for me to finally learn, number one, that's not going to be helpful for them. It's just me to just tell them. And number two, well, of course, you've also got to establish, what is this person seeking advice about? Do they want me to just listen? Do they want advice? Do they want sympathy? So if they do want advice, though, the real art of teaching yoga is helping guide somebody to come to the solution on their own. And that is such a nuanced thing. And I will say that, like, if your yoga practice is in a place where you're not working to be fiercely accountable, taking inventory of the actions, I met with a guy who was way up in the Moravian Church recently, and that's a very progressive branch of Christianity from the Czech Republic, and they've since moved to North Carolina and been there for several hundred years. But they're pretty cool version of Christians, and one of the things he said to me that like really astounded me right out the gate was, nobody who is in a position of being a pastor shouldn't be in therapy. And I took that to mean anybody giving spiritual advice to any degree should be in therapy. And then he said, in the role I'm in, of course, he's the president of this particular whatever branch or division. He's like, when you're at that level, not only do you need to be in therapy, but you really have to be just committed to your own practice in the fiercest sense. And so it really was awesome to hear that, because I find the same to be true, that if I really want to be helping people, that need for me to want to fix things for other people, I can't control it if I'm not doing the things to help myself. And it's not sexy, and it's slow, and it's tedious, and it requires consistency, and there's nothing I could post on Instagram about it to get pats on the back. And some days it feels like a step backwards, and it's uncomfortable. And yes, that is what yoga is. It's going to be years till it gets, maybe sexy. I don't know. But when the honeymoon ends, that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all. So all that to say is, taking the seat of a teacher requires fierce accountability, and that requires being around people who are not sycophants, not people who are just going to tell you yes to your ideas, who are going to push back when you don't have good ideas, who are going to pressure test you, who are going to be accurate and honest sounding boards for you. Having people like that around you in your life, and being willing to be open to hear something other than what you want to hear, that is a level of maturity and humility that I'm continually trying to reach for. There's a Franciscan monk, Richard Rohr, who talks about this, and he says, every day, and I think I've mentioned this before on a yoga how-to, every day I pray for humility. One gift from God to make me humble again. And I think that is spiritually brave. I'm not quite there yet because it's so painful and but I want I want to get to that point someday. I want to get to that level of courage where I'm just like, strip down the ego, because I know that that's the place that I'm fit to serve others from the seat of a teacher. Not to even mention, if you're trying to serve other teachers, it's a whole other level of stripping the ego back and not comparing and not competing, and really checking your intentions and checking your privilege. And also, in terms of the comparison, in terms of the competition, it's not just a matter of like who's more popular, this and that, or it's also sometimes whose yoga is right. And at the end of the day, when it comes to mentorship, it is about the mentee. Another way to say that is, when it comes to yoga, it is about the student, it is not about the teacher. I know I'm not the first person to say that, but I just think that's really profound. Now, the last mode of mentorship I want to talk about is staying a student. Even at 18 years into my teaching is not only qualified by everything I spoke about, staying humble and doing all that work of being accountable and fierce inventory and sober reflection and consistent contemplation, but it's also measured by my ability to be a good student still and to continually be learning. And that's really the thing about yoga teaching that has been maybe the greatest gift, is that it requires you to continue to learn. And yes, that can be sometimes feel like a weight on your shoulders. I don't even want to say burden, because even when it's the hardest, it's still better than not learning. It's still better than just shaping things in your life to try to prove to yourself that you want everything to stay the same and everything should stay the same, and that's the right way for it to be. So in terms of continuing to be a good student, a couple of tips is finding somebody who's been practicing longer than you, and that you respect their disposition. That is really important, not their credentials. Credentials be damned, because there have been a litany of brilliant spiritual masters who didn't have the letters behind their name who got it, right? So you have to trust your intuition with this. But also, if this person wants anything from you that is crossing any type of boundary, that's a huge red flag. Obviously, this is not your yoga teacher. Well, maybe they are, but not for long, right? I'll also say that some other ways to continue to learn: do not sleep on the things that you have already learned, and revisiting them and coming back to them. The Yoga Sutras, I read a version of them every year, as I've already said on one of these yoga how-tos. This is a great way to maintain a reflected anchor point around your own growth, so that you come back to the same material as you grow. It shows you a different version of yourself each and every time. So that's a little bit about kind of the upward and downward aspects of mentorship. I cannot stress how important having guardrails in my life have been, especially as a man. I can tell you that in the men's work that I do, I find more and more and more that it is particularly really successful men, not that I would count myself as one of them per se, not that I'm not successful, but there seems to be a correlation between achieving success in life and this inability to ask the question, could I be wrong? Here's another question. How do I know what I think I know? Those are two really good questions. But what I want to leave you with today, the takeaway, is a really fantastic, and it's not necessarily yoga. I don't know how it could tie into yoga other than like bhavana, contemplation, remembrance, reverence, like offering honorific kinds of things like that. And notice I haven't talked about guruship or anything like that. I will also say, if you're going to learn from a yoga teacher, and I apologize for being all over the place, I'm just stream of consciousness today with this. If you're going to learn from a yoga teacher if you're the type of person who needs to be in a really devotional sense, a really great way to protect your boundary is choosing a dead yoga teacher. Sri Aurobindo, Sri Ramakrishna, TKV Krishnamacharya. Those are three great options. You can go right there. If you don't want a yoga teacher, Alfred Whitehead North. There's a great scientist, mathematician who was basically saying the same things as all these yoga teachers. Baba Haridas, there's another one. So, a dead yoga teacher, you can still tap into their wisdom. You can still contact them. You can still co-create with them. You can still commune with them. And that's what this last little thing is about. So, several months ago, I so have the worst memory around sometimes where I get inspirations, and I just can't remember where this came from. I've been racking my brain, but it was a little idea of writing down a list of the people who've died in your life. And so the list is titled The Powers of the People Who've Passed. And so I write down a name of somebody who I loved. I'm looking at it right now. And then I write down what were some of their greater attributes. And so when I need courage, when I need bravery, I can call upon people who I've known, people who've showed me that kind of love, that particular flavor of valor and virtue. And this can include animals too, by the way. So I've got a nice little list growing, and I guess that's how you know you've lived a little bit. If you, as your list grows, it's kind of a sad thing, but it's also something I'm extremely grateful for and proud of. So, for instance, my mom, the 3 things I have written for her, and it's just got to be short, pithy little things that you can tap into, and you can be in a meditation, you can get into a coherent state, you can work on your heart rate variability, and then you just like focus on the person and how they exhibited, how they role modeled and demonstrated these things in their own life. So my mom, the 3 I have written down for her, and this is a very short list of what I think of my mom because she was the top. Best mom you could ever want, right? Compassion, nurturing, and funny. So when I need compassion in my life, when I need nurturing, when I need funny, and she was courageous too, I can tap into my mom. So this list too, to have on hand, I posted it right here, my office desk, and this last weekend being Halloween and Dia de los Muertos, this was a great time to tap into that. So I hope this inspires you to stay on the path, to consider who the people around you are and what type of energy they're bringing, what type of energy you're bringing. This idea that, yes, in our yoga practice, off the mat, boundaries are very important, accountability is very important, intention is very important, and the relationships are maybe the most, they're kind of like the modern asana aspect of our off the yoga practice. So love to know in the comments. Maybe list somebody who's passed for you and some of their powers. How do you draw from them? Or if you know where I got this idea for this list, let me know, because I really would love to give credit to that person. And maybe you want to shout out to one of your mentors in your life. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Yoga How To. Appreciate you so much.
Be nice. Just got him down. Just pinned him down. Oh, oh, you too.